Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a special edition episode of That Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, and recurring guest, as you can see by the thumbnail. Tom, I didn't show you the thumbnail yet, so that has to get approved. But you are back for a third or fourth time now. How have you been? And we've seen so much news coming through Milan and the pipeline that you've been involved with.
What's up, boys? Always great to be back. Always great to see you guys, talk to you guys. Yeah, I love. I was when I was reporting out this Jovan Kirovski story. I was very excited to get a text from you. It made me happy. I was like, hell yeah! Like, love when our paths overlap. So that was good. That's the motivation, honestly.
Yeah, I was bugging Tom about Divock Origi and some of the rumors with that. And I was like, I didn't even.
I was rooting like hell for that to happen. Let the record show. I did not want to be the guy who was raining on the parade. I was dying for it to happen.
That is true, because you are a Liverpool supporter. That's what few people know, I guess, these days. But you are a Liverpool supporter, so obviously if you support them, Divock Origi is a cult hero to you. Santangelo, you were back as well. How are you?
Doing well. A couple hours after the Europa League draw.
Yes, that's true.
Milan versus Roma. So I think we're finally going to see whether or not El Shaarawy is better than Christian Pulisic, according to Sabatini. I don't know if you guys saw the quote. So, yeah, we got that. We got the Sabatini derby coming up. So I'm excited. I'm pumped. And, I'm ready to get into this one.
Yeah, Liverpool favorites to win that tournament. Doesn't really surprise me. They scored 4 goals in like 15 minutes yesterday. They're disgusting. But anyways,
11-2 over aggregate or whatever.
Yeah, hey, listen. If we face
Slavia Prague, man, those are giant. Those are absolute giants. Like, you got Manchester City and Bayern Munich in the Champions League. They don't know what it's like to go to Prague. They don't have no idea.
They don't get it, man.
They actually don't. No. Except Harry Kane will be making his return to London, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
We have you on today because of news circulating that you and James Horncastle both reported on The Athletic, whom you write for as well. Jovan Kirovski, he is a former technical director of the LA Galaxy, the first American to win the Champions League, as Tom told me prior to the show as well. Played with Borussia Dortmund, has even known Christian Pulisic because of that connection there. Tom, give us the lowdown on who Jovan is in general and kind of who he's been for the LA Galaxy. Obviously has been at the top of football winning the Champions League, so he's not kind of shy to the stage that Milan would be. So what did you kind of make of this news at first when you first heard this? Because this is a kind of random, not so random connection.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, to put out like the U.S. national team pom-poms, it's very cool that an American executive is in talks or should be signing a deal to go to AC Milan and more or less be the bridge from the second team to the first team. It's awesome. There's more American ownership and sponsorship and now players and managers and everything else in Europe. The technical side, the executive side has lagged. There's like Dane Murphy and some other folks. But so that's cool. First and foremost, that's the positive side of it. So Jovan Kirovski, as you said, he's kind of well connected in Europe because of his days as a player, U.S. international as well. He finished his career at the LA Galaxy and pretty quickly joined the front office. I think he was technical director from like 2012 until 2024. He was let go in January, just as the organization was going through kind of a shakeup. It's been a down period over the last 5 or 7 years. The highlight was when Jovan Kirovski was instrumental in a deal to sign Zlatan Ibrahimovic. That's when they were the most fun and the most relevant. But yeah, it hasn't been great in recent times. And Kirovski has plenty of European connections. Like, again, that's how the Zlatan deal got done. When the Galaxy were kind of big star hunting, he was usually at the center of those deals and trying to get them done and negotiating. So he's got a lot of connections in Europe, and that's where it kind of came from. Again, it's not difficult to deduce the Zlatan Ibrahimovic connection to all of this. Again, I was told that Zlatan and him have a very good relationship. It's not like he was looking for a handout or like begging, hey, Zlatan, you need to bring me to Milan. Like, Zlatan reached out to Jovan first, as far as I understand it. And Zlatan, I believe this happened even before he left the Galaxy. So that's kind of why this happened pretty quickly within the 2 months since he left that job.
Okay. Well, Matt, do you want to toss a question here or you want me to keep going?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned Ibrahimovic and the connection between the two here. Ibrahimovic is new into his role. I mean, his post playing career. We know he was champion on the field, and I think he's trying to kind of have that impact and footprint off the pitch, and you see him at the games in the stands. I mean, what type of, I guess, personality, what type of individual is he in that sense? Is he someone that's more hands-on? Are we going to see him? Is he the type of person that's going to be kind of ingrained in, maybe some of the happenings at Milanello? Or is he someone more it's like behind the scenes, like to stay a little bit private, work in silence? What type of personality are we getting there? Because we know sometimes you can get clashing personalities, and if there's a difference in ideas, it doesn't always lead to a good working relationship. So can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say the latter, in that he's somebody who kind of works in silence behind the scenes. You don't see him doing a ton of interviews during his time at the Galaxy, and working with others. Again, the Galaxy has been a bit convoluted over the last decade, but I will say on the positive end, it's not like he was really ever necessarily like running the show by himself. Mm-hmm. So he's been able to do his job where they had a club president, Chris Klein, who did a lot. Their ownership would kind of step in sometimes, like once in a while. He had I think 2 or 3 different general managers during his time while he was technical director. Bruce Arena was head coach during that time. He obviously has a big sway and a big voice in the front office. So in terms of working with others, like Jovan did nothing new, right? Like the Galaxy, for the good and bad parts about working at a big club, I think he'll be ready for that in Milan again, right? Like there's a lot of voices, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, I'm sure. The negative side is that the Galaxy haven't had a ton of success over the last 5 or 7 years, like I was saying. I think they missed the playoffs 5 out of the last 7 years, and the 1 or 2 times they made it under some of those Zlatan teams, they got like drop kicked out of the playoffs by the rivals LAFC. Again, that happens, right? But like it's not like he's coming with like this overwhelming, like, oh my God, they've been top 4 in the West every single year. Oh, look at all these great signings, right? Like, and I think a lot of that had to do with just too many cooks in the kitchen for this team. So I'm sure everybody who's gone through this group, Dennis Tecloso, the Feyenoord CEO now, was in this group. Will Koons is now the general manager, CSO. He came from LAFC where there was a lot of success. I'm sure all of the people in this front office will say, oh no, I did the Zlatan, I did the good deals. Oh no, Douglas Costa, that was somebody else, right? Like, so we don't really know what the truth is, but I'm excited to see what he does at AC Milan.
Yeah, so this is the real interesting thing here, because you mentioned he's at the forefront of all these massive signings and deals, but the proposed job offer is for a second team. And as we know, in Spain, Barcelona B, it's been well known on how much success they have garnered over the years and how great they're the gold standard for producing talents. Mm-hmm. Milan have done a great job actually in recent years, right? As we've all known, just making the semifinal, eliminating Real Madrid for the 2nd consecutive years at the youth league level. We know how big of a name Francesco Camarda is, and some of these other players that they have helped develop. However, why move into the direction with a guy that his strengths are probably at the forefront of these major star signings? I guess it could come from the perspective that he was one of the first successful Americans in Europe. Is this kind of the angle that we could be seeing here?
I mean, maybe. Honestly, that's a fair question, right? Like that, this hasn't really been his job title, and the Galaxy, whether it's his fault or not, haven't really maximized their very talent-rich local market until a couple of years ago. So, how it was described to me by sources is Zlatan is pushing for the second team to be better and to not waste their investment into it. One of the people I was speaking with was like, yeah, you kind of look at the second team, right? Like Martino, you say a couple of the prospects, but when was the last time that Milan sold a second team player or somebody through the academy that, hey, maybe they're not quite good enough for the first team, and that's okay because AC Milan are one of the biggest clubs in the world. But look at Manchester City, how much money they're getting from second team players or academy players that never aren't quite first team good enough, right? Barcelona, how many kids came through the Barcelona academy that are sold for 10 million euros to another La Liga team with either a sell-on or a buyback clause? So that's the idea of what Zlatan, the ownership, the executives want to see with the second team. And again, whether or not Jovan is the correct person to be the liaison between the second team and the first team, I will say probably this comes with more aggressive acquisitions, player acquisitions for the second team, which would be Jovan's strength in terms of negotiating and everything. So if they spot, scouting department, a 16, 17-year-old in Croatia or a different Italian club, and trying to bring them to Milan and develop them in that second team. And again, first and foremost, you try to get the next stars for the first team, right? But we all know that's not always going to happen. And again, it is very difficult to break into the Milan first team and to be a difference maker in that team. So the secondary thing is, all right, even if we're not creating players for the first team, we have to be finding good players, developing them, keeping their value. So then the second team becomes a money-making center for the first team. And then that helps with transfers for the first team. That helps with everything, right? Again, I think Manchester City has been at the forefront of this. Liverpool, there's been a couple stories about like the gold mine kind of they're sitting on with all these kids coming through from the second team. Not all of them are going to make it to the first team. It's just a numbers game, right? So if they're able to sell some of these players, like they had Danny Ward, again, sorry to go making this about Liverpool. Liverpool had Danny Ward. He was like their third string goalkeeper. He showed well in a couple games during injuries. Then they sold him to like Leicester for like $10 or $12 million. Like he was never going to take the starting job from Alisson. But he's a valuable player, and that's a valuable asset. And I think these teams have gotten much smarter in Europe at the top of like, oh, the second team isn't just for creating talent for the first team. It can also help pay for our academy, help pay for a first team signing or two if we do this right.
I think what's interesting too, Tom and Martino, is the fact that there has been such a strong emphasis on having that American blueprint or footprint in this league, but also in recent years with Milan, right? You talk about the Redbird with American ownership. You talk about bringing in two premier young talents, Musah being younger than Pulisic, but two really promising players for the men's national team. Then you talk about the recent integration of the academy, the Milan Academy in Virginia, and now you're talking about another director with American background as well. I just think that the bigger picture here is exactly what you alluded to, taking some of the principles that are prevalent in major American sports and trying to sort of mend them into that European/Italian football way of doing things. And I think you're absolutely bang on, Tom, in the sense that, yes, you want to use your academy and a potential second team as a farm to be as a pipeline to bring those players through. But I think we've seen, in many years, there's plenty of examples of players that are good at that level, but that they can be sold off and you can fund, other things in the market. You can maybe afford to be a little bit more flexible when you're able to have the luxury of selling a player that, frankly, maybe doesn't have enough to play for Milan, but maybe he can play for a Lecce or a Fiorentina or a Salernitana, something like that. And I think that's what kind of Milan needs to also get back to as well. Is yes, you want to be able to usher along Italian players because you still want to have that DNA, that background that some of these top clubs in Europe have. You look at what City's doing, where they have players coming into their team where they're not playing huge minutes, but you could see the noticeable impact when they do get that opportunity. Same thing with Liverpool, and same thing even with Chelsea. So I want to see Milan get back to that sort of way of doing things where they can buy the players they need at the first level to make the difference, but they can also at a grassroots level be able to have a pipeline of players that can come through and siphon through the system and come up to the first team, but also be a resource on the sales side that could potentially fund future investments.
Yeah, and again, just the key part with that, even financially with Italian teams, just as opposed to Manchester City, right? A lot of people just always point to City just being overly wealthy as an ownership group, but the amount of business that they do, like even Cole Palmer, if we want to use it for an example, Cole is fantastic, and I think he's going to be a very good player, but that they were able to afford to sell somebody for like 35 million. And again, that's pure profit, and pure profit for Premier League clubs doesn't weigh exactly the same as it does for Italian clubs, strictly because of revenue from TV, just consistently making the Champions League all the time. Like the amount of money, like for a 10 million pure profit sale of a youth player, for example, for Milan compared to Manchester City, that's so much more valuable for this club than it is to City at the end of the day. So I think that's a big part. But Tom, and I was just thinking of this popping into my head because I saw this interview with Jovan and Pulisic. So two examples of American talents going to Europe, developing and having success, both of which winning a Champions League. Do we see the potential of poaching more talents there? Because we've seen Zlatan be on the record about how the youth system in the U.S. is, I wouldn't say corrupt, he would say it was a bit too expensive for quite a lot of people. And that's been the main issue for anyone that knows anything about the system, and that's just one of the many. Do you see this, and even when Matt mentioned the Virginia Academy as well, do you see potentially more youth players getting the go-ahead of like, hey, you're speaking to Pulisic, potentially Musah, Jovan, and then Zlatan Ibrahimovic saying like, hey, come over here. We have proof that we could develop you as a star player. This isn't the same as like we need you to pay us like 10 to 15 grand just to be on the team or something like that. This is one of the greatest academies that has existed. And then you could just develop over the course of time. And we've seen more Americans make this leap to Europe. Do you think that's kind of possibly an angle that they try to exploit here? Because again, like Matt said, you see the groundwork being laid. Academy in Virginia for the first time, and then we have these connections here in the U.S. So, is this a real possibility that we see more American talents poached?
Yeah, I mean, sure. It comes down to passports as well, right? You need to have an EU passport to go before you're 18, so that obviously makes it difficult. So again, it ends up being kind of a case by case basis there. But look, that's part of it. Like Jovan will have all of the networks that he still has in the United States. He will know where the best talent is coming from, and maybe, hey, again, if we're looking at this in an optimistic view, maybe he was behind the scenes saying we should invest more in our academy at LA and with whatever. And so maybe he says to the ownership, to the front office, technical staff, like, hey, like, if we can find 16 to 18-year-olds in the LA area, like, we should do that. So yeah, I think that's all part of it, and that comes with familiarity as well, right? Like you said, all of the American connections now with this team. You have a lot of American kids watching Milan more so than 4 years ago or even 2 years ago with Pulisic, right? Like, again, there's a lot of Milan fans in this country to begin with, but obviously with all of the American connections and everything else that comes through, there's going to be more viewership, there's going to be more eyes and exposure than just, say, the Premier League, right? Or any other league. So, sure, like, I think that could be part of it. I don't think that that's a main component of this. I don't think that that's a crucial part. I don't think it's a success or failure if, say, there's 10 more American kids in the academy or there's 0 American kids in the academy. Like, I think this is, like, in the background, but it's definitely a possibility. And again, it shows, like you said, with the opening of the Virginia Academy and everything else, like American ownership and the executive staff, valuing the American market more, both in terms, like, obviously, even before new American owners took over, the American business landscape was something that all these clubs definitely wanted. But I think now maybe, again, with Zlatan, Jovan, Pulisic, and everything else, it's like, okay, like the player side, the technical side of this, we can mine here as well.
Matt? Santangelo? Any
sorry, I
thought he froze.
Construction going across the street, so like I kind of like was hearing a little bit of that. The last thing I guess I wanted to present to you, or throw over to you, Tom, is for a handful of years, Bundesliga was considered like the place for a lot of these Americans to go and kind of ply their trade and get their feet wet in European football. And it's a top 5 European league, so it's not like it's one of these leagues that's kind of lower on the totem pole. It's
right.
Very good competition. You have some quality players in there, quality teams. Do you see, this is me thinking more so beyond Milan and thinking larger scope with the league and the future of the league from a marketing standpoint, from TV revenue and exposure. Do you feel that Serie A is going to see more players of American background making that plunge over here, maybe instead of opting to a La Liga? Now, I know you have your premier teams in some of these leagues, but you and I can all agree that, the way that a lot of these leagues are shifting, La Liga is not the same as far as, in my view, the type of appeal. You see what Barcelona's situation is. Atletico Madrid, are they the team that's going to be ushering along American players? Are there really many better places to go for a young, talented American player right now to perform at a high level and to play with some top players than some of these teams in Serie A? And, we even saw Buchanan, who's a Canada men's national team player, the first, I believe, to play in Serie A. Like, I think you're starting to see the North American footprint beyond just this country make its way into Serie A. Do you feel like that's going to continue to go in that direction?
Yeah, for the players that are breaking through in their first teams in MLS or other leagues, yeah, it's absolutely going to be a big focus and a big landing spot. But again, why Germany is so much easier for American kids to go through is there aren't as many restrictions on non-European players. Like Weston McKennie, like he had his dad from the military that was over there, so that like helped. But it's just much easier to get to Germany, as far as my, again, loose understanding of passport registration rules, than it would be for kids to get to Italy or wherever else without an EU passport. And in Italy, like, it's the 2 foreign signings per season that teams can get. Like, I remember I got a crash course on this when I was reporting out the Brian Reynolds transfer because of, okay, well then they'll loan him to a different Italian team, but that Italian team, never mind, they don't have an EU slot either. And then it was just like all these different things of, okay, like Milan really like this, Roma really like this player. But these are all the hoops that we have to jump through because he's American and not Belgian, right? Like, so like that has more to do with it, I think, than anything else.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because the difficulty of dealing with Italian football and Serie A, there's so much red tape. Like, that's not surprising that it's difficult for Serie A to get more players, and they have these restrictions that you just laid out. So, yeah, I just
they
find
just
that very
went to
funny
go
that you kind of, like,
investigate
double
a
down
club
there.
because they used a loan to buy a team, and they didn't.
Yeah.
I saw that. Didn't the club, like the police showed up to like look at paperwork or something?
Yeah, so financial authorities showed up to Casa Milan, which is Milan's headquarters, and they went to go raid the offices of the finances, and they were just basically like, "Oh, you're not the real owners of this team," and it's like, "Well, we literally told everybody we are the owners of this team." So here are the documents. And Zlatan actually even commented on it this morning, saying that like they have nothing on us. Redbird owned the team. Like, I don't know what we're doing here. This is such a waste of time. Speaking of stuff that we hope is not a waste of time, this isn't official yet, as we know.
Right.
The likelihood of this getting done, if Tom Bogert were to put this on a scale of 0 to 100, what would that number be?
High. I mean, when I reported it, was it last week or earlier this week? Sorry. I was honestly surprised that it took that long. Right. Like, I thought that this was gonna have been signed already. Just based on like he's been to Milan a couple times and whatever. Like he like. I think he's in Europe now. We're going back. I don't know. Like, whatever it is, I'm honestly just a little bit surprised that it's not done. Again, I always have to be boring and couch it for myself that, like, yeah, advanced talks or nearing a deal or whatever. But I'd be very surprised if this doesn't happen.
Okay, and one more question. Sant'Angelo, I'm not sure if you want to agree with this. We talked about this yesterday. This is just more of a little bit of a propaganda question here. Christian Pulisic, this current season, and how well he's been producing. Is this the greatest season from an American in Europe, or in your eyes, is it still Clint Dempsey's season at Fulham when they went to the Europa League final?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'd still lean with Dempsey. There's still time, obviously, for Pulisic to do some more through the rest of the season. Again, that Europa League run, that moment that he had against Juventus is, man, like it's just unreal. So that's still the lore for me. That's still number one. I don't know if you guys think about Josie Altidore, 1 goal in about 75 appearances for Sunderland or whatever it was. You know, that might be up there, maybe not.
I have no comment further on Josie Altidore.
I thought Josie was going to be awesome about it. This isn't a negative Josie thing. It's just kind of the first example that came to mind. I thought he was going to be phenomenal there.
I have nothing special to say about that. But worst case, second best season by an American. I mean, just like honestly, even I'm not sure how many of the games that you've been able to catch of Milan. I'm sure you've caught more of when Pulisic is on rather than some of the games that Musah's gotten into. Your thoughts on this, because like this was a huge bounce back year. Forget about the production alone. He's also been healthy, which has been a huge plus for him in a league that Matt even mentioned yesterday, a little bit more physical. And again, with Yunus Musah, someone that we discussed as well, he is still very young despite the amount of minutes that he has played in his career.
Yeah.
I think there's been so many great flashes so far this season. What, in your eyes, just as a U.S. men's national team fan before we wrap up here, what did you think of this first season for them so far? I know we're through the middle of March. We're kind of winding on down in the home stretch here. But this has been an overwhelming success, I think.
Yeah. Oh, my God, yeah. So, look, like last spring when it was pretty clear that Pulisic was going to leave Chelsea in the summer, you start thinking of, okay, what would make sense? Would going back to Dortmund, maybe, like, all right, like, that'd be cool. And then, like, I was like, honest to God, AC Milan would be my top choice. Just I think he'd fit well in that league. It's a big club. Everything else that kind of goes with it. But I was like, what? I don't know if they like him, or I don't know what their finances look like in terms of his contract, what his appetite is to take. Like, again, it's probably almost definitely a decrease from whatever he was on at Chelsea. Again, I know that Milan are no slouches, but it's different, right? And it's just like, I think he'd fit really well in Serie A. I think he'd fit really well in that team. And even with all of that optimism, it's exceeded all expectations for Pulisic. It's been phenomenal. Like you said, the injury side has been great. It is awesome for his career. And this is the Pulisic that the national team needs going to Copa America next summer, because we need that alpha elite attacker, and right now he is. Yunus Musah, it hasn't been exactly the same as Pulisic. Again, he's younger. There's more competition in his position. Like Ruben Loftus-Cheek is a very good player. It's difficult. I know that he was getting some minutes at wingback, which I'm fine with, honestly. Like I get it that You want him
It was
to
a
just
tough
get all of his
game for
reps in
him.
central midfield, huh?
It was a tough game for him. That he got subbed on late against Lecce, and he had 2 errors committed. I mean, they weren't kind of relevant to his
Yeah.
position at the time, but
Right.
just even his mental capacity to bounce back from that was impressive.
Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
His best performances came after that game, but continue. Yeah.
Yeah, and like again, a player at his age, and again, despite how much he played for Valencia were a bit of a dumpster fire. He was one of their bright spots, so he was playing a ton of minutes, and he earned all those minutes. It's more difficult to earn that exact same minutes at AC Milan, so I don't think that there's anything bad with this season, right? Like this is still, as you said, like it feels like he's been around forever, particularly with the national team, because it seems like he's played so many minutes for the national team, but he was starting that at like what, 18, 19? Like, so he's still young, man. Like there's still growth. He is nothing close to a finished product. So like I hope that AC Milan stick behind him and keep him and have a plan to continue with his minutes. But again, we'll see. It's the top of football, so it's tough. But look, I overwhelmingly positive for Pulisic and Musah from my end.
Matt, any final comments, questions before we head out?
No, real quick, I just want to kind of add on the Musah topic because I think we talked about Pulisic, but I think Musah's had a little bit of an interesting year. I think he got into the team, he had a little more competition. The midfield was entirely revamped.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of questions about whether he was going to play a 6, an 8, and I think Pioli's experimented quite a bit with him. Wing back, as one of the 2 midfielders in a double pivot, in a traditional 3. So he's kind of gotten exposed to a lot of different roles within this team. And I think, we've seen him thrive in more areas better than the other. But I think what we've seen from him of late is the fact that he's started to, in my view, translate to a player that can play a little bit deeper, play that box to box, carries the ball extremely well, super technical. I'm loving what I'm seeing from Musah. And my expectations were different than I think many coming into the season because people at first glance looked at the price tag and say this guy has to be an immediate player. But I think Milan are playing the long game with him and thinking this is a player that has a lot of quality, can translate over very many areas, and he's already showing the capabilities to withstand in a physical league and be an impact midfielder for us. So I'm pretty pleased, and I'm excited to see what the the next seasons look for him. Because I think if you look at up and down this roster, the younger players have taken about a year and a half to kind of really start to hit their full stride. And I think Musah is going to be the next one.
100%. Just keep patient with him. We appreciate everybody that has tuned into the channel, liked and subscribed and comments your favorite Tom Bogert meme with his mustache. And again, Tom, you are a YouTuber now as well, many other things. So as you guys can see on the bottom, follow Tom on Twitter at Tom Bogert, one of the best MLS writers and reporters. I called you the Kylian Mbappe of MLS reporters. It's going well. This is a great future. Too bad I couldn't place a ticket on it. And again, your channel, Tom Bogert. You've been experimenting, getting a lot better at everything. So very excited and very happy for you with all of that. Anything else that some people can expect from the channel in the coming months and weeks, or?
Yeah, we're figuring it out, exploring the space as we go along. I started to do some FM stuff because I love FM, so I think that's going all right. So that'll be fun, but we'll see. We'll see how people like it.
Yeah, of course. Again, Tom, we always appreciate you and your time that you give to us. Hopefully we have you back on closer to the summer. We'll see if anything moves on front with this deal. If Divock Origi finally gets his dream move to LA, maybe Jovan convinces him that LA isn't too bad. He takes the big head and heads out there. But again, Tom, we appreciate you so much. Matt, you guys can go and follow him at Matt_Santangelo on Twitter. And all of his writing is fantastic as usual. And listen to yesterday's episode after Milan finally, knocked out Slavia Prague. And Pulisic and Leao look like they're boys, by the way. So no drama there. And again, at Martino Pucci everywhere for myself. Tom, appreciate you once again. And everybody enjoy your weekend. Take care.